Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. So this video is going to be my labor and delivery story with baby girl number 2, and this is actually a successful VBAC story and a positive birth story. So I'm really excited to share that with you because this experience was truly so healing for me. It was such a beautiful experience and I'm just so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for the way that it turned out. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So I think I mentioned in my last bump date that I had been having prodromal labor for about a week before I went into real labor. But prodromal labor can be very emotionally, not just physically exhausting because you're having legit contractions, painful contractions, uncomfortable contractions on and off for days at a time with, you know, no sight to progression. But it's also very mentally draining as well because you never know like when it's actually gonna happen. It's like your mind is playing tricks on you, and then you also have to anticipate like, well, if tonight's the night, you know, like who's gonna take care of my baby, who am I gonna call, like this and that, because I had everything set up, and depending on the day of the week it was gonna depend on who stayed with Iris, my daughter, whenever we did go into labor. So that was also a little bit stressful for me. So for the last week, I had been trying to induce my own labor at home with natural methods, like bouncing on my ball. I had been doing the red raspberry leaf tea and the evening primrose oil. Those I was doing mainly just for birth prep, not so much for induction, but obviously I continued that, bouncing on my ball to make sure that she was in the right position, opening up my pelvis. I also went ahead and I had tried castor oil like 3 times and it worked on the 3rd time, but I had tried castor oil to no avail, didn't do anything. I was eating dates, I was pumping also. I know that nipple stimulation releases oxytocin, which could help to induce labor. I did that for about a week as well, because when I started, I didn't think I would have to do it for a whole week. But yeah, every single day for about an hour, I would just sit on my breast pump and pump, but that didn't do anything. So let's fast forward. Those are just a couple of the things that I had been doing for about a week before I went into labor. And then on Sunday, July 11th, I was tired and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do all of these things together, right? I'm gonna go ahead and do all of these things together and see what happens. So that night I decided that I was going to pump while sitting on my ball for an hour, do the castor oil, and then after drinking the castor oil, I was going to have some ginger tea and see what happened. So that's exactly what I did. I took a shower, I had my castor oil, I had my tea, and then I sat on the pump for about an hour bouncing on my ball. Right after I was done with that, I put my evening primrose oil up there, put on a pad, laid down to go to bed. And I remember waking up around 1. I just felt like a little weird, but I went, I used the bathroom. I didn't really feel too much cramping. I was feeling a little bit of cramping, but nothing crazy. And usually in the middle of the night was when I would get my most intense prodromal labor contractions. So I thought that it was just that. So I went back to bed, and then I woke up again at 4 a.m. with relatively painful contractions. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, probably like a 4. You know, enough for me to wake up and notice and be like, ouch, this is really uncomfortable. And when I went to use the bathroom, I noticed that my panty liner was soaked, like completely soaked. So I was like, that's weird. I don't, like, the evening primrose oil usually doesn't wet it this much. And so I went and I changed my panty liner. And as soon as I did that, I had I got up, I had a contraction, and I felt that with that contraction, I felt a little gush of water. And I was like, oh, okay. So I took a little hand mirror. It sounds a little gross, but I took a little hand mirror that I have, and I squatted down and I coughed, and a gush of water came out. And I was like, yeah, my water definitely broke. So I started timing my contractions, and they were every 4 to 5 minutes at first, but that was only for about 30 minutes. And then they picked up to about every 2 to 3 minutes. So by this point, it was already almost 5 a.m. I woke up Michael. I told him, because he wakes up around 5 a.m. to get ready for work. But I told him, I was like, you're going to have to tell them that you're not going to be at work today because my water broke. So this was already the morning of July 12th, Monday, July 12th. And so my water broke around 4 a.m. on Monday, July 12th. And I was timing my contractions. I called my best friend because she was the one who was going to come stay with Iris if my water happened to break during the week. And she came over. She was here by like 6 a.m. And Iris was like kind of waking up already. So we went ahead, we said goodbye to her. We told her we were going to go get her little sister, and then off to the hospital we went. So we got there like a little bit before 7. And mind you, my contractions were just getting worse, literally to the point where I had to stop and breathe with every contraction because I could not just ride through it. Like I had to concentrate on it. And so I'm even walking into triage, and as I'm walking, I had to stop and like hold myself. And the nurse there is like, okay, she's in active labor. Let's go ahead and start getting everything prepped, like whatever. She could tell, right? So, oh, and at this point I was 38 weeks and 3 days. So I was already full term. And like I said, this was a Vbac pregnancy. So, I didn't want to go to 40 weeks if I didn't have to. And I know everyone will have their own opinion on, you know, oh, you should wait until the baby's ready, blah, 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 this and that. But I felt comfortable with the choices that I made, and she was born perfectly healthy, and we're happy for, you know, everything turned out fine. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So I'm walking into triage, and they get me back there right away. But the doctor does not come to check me until 9 a.m. So I'm literally there for 2 hours laboring on my back because they would not let me get up because they're monitoring the contractions and the baby, and the contractions are still coming every 2 to 3 minutes. And if you've ever been in labor, you know how painful it can be to be on your back. Like that's one of the most painful positions to be when you're trying to like move through a contraction or deal with a contraction, and I couldn't move. Literally the only thing I could move was my head, and the whole entire time I had my eyes closed. I was just listening to meditating music and just trying to ride the wave of those contractions, because my goal was to have as natural of a birth as I could. I was planning on getting the epidural, which I'll get into in a little bit. But ultimately I did want a natural unmedicated birth. So obviously I wasn't on any medication there. They didn't give me anything, but the doctor didn't come to check me until like 9 a.m. And when he did, he was like, okay, you're 5, almost 6 centimeters dilated. Your water definitely broke. I don't feel anything. You know, I don't feel any bag there. So we're going to go ahead and admit you and let your doctor know that you're here and all of that good stuff. So they went ahead and they admitted me. And I thought that I was going to be one of those people that, like, you know, was walking around during contractions, doing this, doing that. No. So as soon as we got to the room, I found the most comfort in just sitting at the edge of the bed. And then whenever a contraction came, I held on to Michael and kind of just like supported myself on him, if that made sense. Like think of kind of like a squat bar and like kind of just holding yourself onto the squat bar, but he was my bar. And that's just what I felt most comfortable with. That's basically how I labored the whole entire time. I would kind of like use him as a bar support, and then I would kind of just use him as a bar of support. And then once the contraction was over, rest, breathe. This whole entire time I'm just there listening to my meditative music and practically with my eyes closed, just trying to be in the moment. It was very peaceful, very relaxing. It was very painful, but again, a completely different experience from my first time. I did have a birth plan, which I shared with my nurse. My nurse was amazing. She, you know, really respected my birth plan. I'm so happy with that. And just, she was so supportive, so funny, you know, just really, it was a very good time. Being that it was during COVID, I would just like to mention, I don't know what your hospital policies are or anything like that. We didn't have to wear masks in our room. They did test us for COVID. Well, they tested me for COVID in triage before sending us to the room. And if I came out positive, they would have assumed that Michael was positive as well, and we would have gone into like a special area. But we were negative. So while we were in triage and things like that, I did have to have my mask on. But as soon as we got to the labor and delivery room, since I wasn't leaving anywhere, I didn't have to wear my mask, which was good. I didn't have to wear my mask while pushing or anything like that. So yeah, I know that, some people have a different experience depending on their hospital policies, but luckily mine was not so strict when it came to that. So that was cool. And so I ended up laboring like that until about 11:30, almost 12 o'clock. And when they came to check me, I was at about 7.5 centimeters. And at that point, I decided to get the epidural. And the reason that I got the epidural was mainly because in case of an emergency, I wanted to have the epidural in place so that I wouldn't have to get put under completely if I did need an operation. So because I was a VBAC, obviously there's always chance for a uterine rupture, and if that were to happen, she would have had to cut me open right then and there in the bed. I wouldn't have had time to go to an OR or anything like that. So in that case, if I did not have the epidural, then they would have had to put me out completely. Michael wouldn't have been able to have been in the room or anything like that. Whereas if I had the epidural in place and something like that were to happen, all they have to do is bump up the medicine and they could go ahead and do it, and I wouldn't have to be put to sleep. So that was my train of thought. Now, on my birth plan, I also mentioned that if I did get the epidural, but everything was going well, like everything was looking good, being my blood pressure was looking good, baby's heart rate was looking good, everything was good, I did want to have the epidural turned off before I started pushing so that I could feel my contractions and feel when to push, which is why I said I did want to have an unmedicated birth itself. So at around 1 o'clock, my nurse checked me again, and she said that I was at about 9.5. I just had a tiny little bit of a lip, and she's like, if you want, we could try to push past it, or we can wait a little bit. So we waited about another hour to see if I progressed to the 10. I hadn't, but she's like, you can start pushing past it, seeing what you want to do. And I was like, okay. So this was around 2 o'clock already. And then she told me that my doctor had to go in for an emergency for one of her labors, because she had 4 people delivering that day, including me. So she had 3 other patients delivering in that hospital aside from myself that morning. So obviously I wanted to deliver solely with her because she was delivering my VBAC baby. So I basically just hung out until she was ready to tell me, hey, doctors should be out of surgery soon. We can go ahead and turn off your epidural now. And that was around 3:30, a little bit before 3:30. And so she told me, she's like, okay, the doctor's almost done. We're going to go ahead and turn off the epidural. Oh, and before this, I had asked them to turn the epidural down because I was completely numb. I was too numb. She told me, she's like, okay, you're going to feel pressure down there. When the baby, she's like, it's not going to be painful, but you're going to feel pressure when the baby is low enough. But I couldn't feel anything. So I don't know if it's just that, I'm very sensitive to it, or they had it up very high. I know that they had it at a 10, and I asked them to bring it down to an 8. And then that was still too high. So I asked them to bring it down to a 6. And so my epidural was at a 6. So I still kind of felt something, but for the most part, I was still pretty numb. So when they turned it off, I had already been receiving a little bit less of the regular dose for the epidural, but she told me that within the hour it would be completely out of my system and that I would be feeling my contractions again. And I was like, okay. Within half an hour, I was already feeling my contractions, so around 4 o'clock, and my doctor still had not gotten there. So I was like, oh no, what did I do to myself? Because I had already been laboring with no pain for a couple of hours, and to then have to experience that pain again, I was just like, oh no. But I'm really glad that I did, because it turned out amazingly. So around 4 o'clock, 4:10 or something like that, my doctor comes in, she gets ready, she's like, okay, we can go ahead and start, pushing. I think I was at +1 station, which is good. It means that the baby is, pretty much like they're right there. 10 centimeters fully dilated plus 1 station. So she's like, yeah, she's super ready to push. And she asked me how I wanted to push. I didn't want to push on my back to begin with, just because I knew that that's not always the best position to push in. But I also didn't want to push on my back because the epidural catheter was, I guess the way it was positioned, it was just so painful in my back, that laying on my back was hurting more than the contractions itself. So at first I tried a little bit on all fours, but that was a little bit uncomfortable, and they couldn't really read the contractions correctly because of the way that the monitors were on my belly. So we ended up just like, I was laying on my right side and I was holding my left leg up. So that's kind of how I ended up pushing her out, just laying on my side. Michael was in front of me and I was holding him with my right hand, holding my left leg up with my left hand, and my nurse was behind me, kind of just like holding my back, making sure that I was straight, not falling off the bed. And then my doctor was at the end of the bed. I pushed for about 40 minutes and she was born. And like I said, I didn't have the epidural on at that time. I still had the catheter in, but there was no medicine being pumped into it. So I did get to feel all of those, last contractions. I got to feel her coming out, the ring of fire, like everything. But it was amazing. It was so amazing. She was born 6 pounds, 1 ounce, itty bitty little thing. I did get to do the delayed cord clamping. I got to see my placenta. That was really cool because I did have it encapsulated, so she knew that I was going to keep it. But she showed it to me, and that was really cool. And they went to go take her to the little incubator thing to weigh her and stuff. And the first thing I hear Michael yell is, "She has your mom's toes." I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, and just for reference, again, this is a time of COVID, so we're not allowed to have visitors or anything like that. And we had been in there for a long time. She wasn't born until 5 p.m., but I got to the hospital at 7 a.m. So I guess everyone was anticipating for her to come sooner. And she would have come sooner if my doctor wasn't delivering another baby, but granted, whatever. So Michael's dad ends up showing up to the hospital. He calls him while I'm pushing, and Michael has to tell him, like, no, go home, you can't come. She's in the middle of pushing, I gotta go by. Like, it was just so weird, the way that everything just happened. And it was just like, I don't even know. But it was such an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful for it. So she was born 6 pounds, 1 ounce. She cried. They put her on my chest. We did our skin to skin. She has been an amazing breastfeeder since day 1, which is amazing again, because that was not the case with my first. She has had amazing weight gain. We haven't had an issue with that at all. I haven't had an issue with my nipples cracking or anything like that at all. And yeah, basically she was born on July 12th at about 5 p.m. Via Vbac. And I didn't tear. All I had was like a little, like maybe scrape at the bottom of my vagina. And I did have like a teeny tiny little tear on my labia that burned for a little while. But other than that, nothing. And I think that has to do with, yes, she was small, but I'm also a very small person, and I know people who have had small babies who still tear. And I think it was very much partly due to the evening primrose oil. I've heard that can really help with preventing tearing. And so in my case, it did help, which is great. So if that's something you're considering, just keep that in mind. But yeah. My healing has been great. I am going to do a 1-month postpartum update. But that is basically it for this video. I'm not going to go ahead and show her because she is sleeping. Maybe I'll show her at my 1-month postpartum update. But that is basically it for my labor and delivery story, positive birth story, successful VBAC. And yeah, if you guys have any questions at all, please be sure to leave them down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. And I can't wait to share the rest of this journey with you guys. And yeah, I will see you in my next video.